David Helman with us, Craig Smoke, David Smoke, 365 Sports. So what were your thoughts when you saw the news on Jalen Hurts, the number, the guarantee, and the no-trade clause?
Smart teams do smart things. It obviously, when you have a quarterback break out like that, I think there's only so many options you have. I mean, sure, you can try to let the guy go, but the number of teams that have ever tried to do that and the success that they've had is very small. So if you accept that the Eagles need to pay Jalen Hurts, then the next best option is to do it as soon as possible. And for the Eagles to get in on the ground floor 2 months after his season ended and beat Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Justin Herbert to the negotiating table, I think it's fantastic because the Eagles have now set the standard for 3 to 5 other quarterbacks to use him as the benchmark, which means, 2 months from now, Jalen Hurts' deal might look like a complete and total bargain. And that's what I harp on all the time. If you've got a quarterback you might need to pay, the faster you do it, the better, because it keeps the price down, and it also starts the clock on when you can get through those guarantees and move on if you need to. We saw the Eagles do this, honestly. I mean, you can look at the Carson Wentz deal and say that it didn't work out, but by signing him as early as possible, they were able to move on quicker. Obviously, Jalen Hurts' no-trade clause makes that a little more difficult, but I think you're also talking about a 24-year-old guy who I'm perfectly comfortable betting on his upside. So it's a 5-year deal. Probably means in 4 years you could cut him if you needed to get on, to get by and start a new chapter. I think it makes a ton of sense for everybody involved. I think it was incredibly smart.
David, as somebody who saw him a lot at Alabama, I mean, we know the story there, benched at one point, but, one of Saban's favorite guys, a hard worker, all that, second-round pick, so it's not like he was super disrespected and, Mr. Irrelevant or anything like that, but just any surprise on your part that how quickly he's gone from the 2020 draft to 3 years later, a Super Bowl appearance and the highest-paid player in the game?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I watched him closely as an LSU fan, and just my impression, and even as OU's quarterback, as a Heisman contender, I thought that he had very severe and obvious limitations as a passer. And I still don't think he is the best passer in the NFL, but I think people are so quick to discount a running quarterback's ability. And when you talk about, what he's able to do in the passing game with talent around him, which is more than enough, by the way. I mean, for my money, he played every bit as good as Patrick Mahomes, if not better, in that Super Bowl. And then you add that to a running ability that makes the Eagles the best rushing offense in football. That's special. And again, he's 24 years old. He's a sturdy guy. Like, obviously it's football and anything can happen, but I'm not particularly worried about his durability. It's just a testament to his work ethic. And again, I've said this, I think I've been saying this for 2 years at this point. Their games do not look that similar, but Jalen reminds me a lot of Dak in the sense that he brings those intangibles, that work ethic, that ability to rally a locker room, the way, he's everything you want in an intangible perspective from a quarterback. And clearly when you put enough talent around him, he can produce at a level that backs that up. And that's what makes this so smart for the Eagles as well, is that the faster you sign him, the more flexibility you have. He's still got a year of his rookie deal that you can spread that money out over to keep his cap hit down. I mean, we saw this with Josh Allen. They signed him 2 years ago. They got 2 seasons of still relatively cheap play out of him before his cap number started to grow. And the Eagles are going to have that same luxury with Jalen Hurts. Like, it's easy to say, oh, he's on a big contract now, you won't be able to put talent around him. That's not necessarily true, because the faster you sign him and the more flexibility you have, the more you can keep his costs down and keep good players around him. I think the Eagles will probably be able to keep the vast majority of their roster intact for at least the next 2 or 3 seasons. And in the NFL, that's really all you can ask for. So like I said, I think it's an incredibly, incredibly smart move by Philly to make sure that this got done sooner rather than later.
For anyone who wants to question the commitment, that's fine. The quarterbacks get hurt, you get hurt. But imagine of how many of the 32 teams, David, right now wish they had to make that decision on Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, it's easy to poke holes in these guys' games until you don't have that. And yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, you can't tell me there's more than 5 or 6 teams in the league that definitively feel better about their quarterback situation than the Eagles. I mean, obviously the Chiefs, obviously the Bengals, probably the Chargers. You can't even say the Ravens, given that the Ravens can't come to an agreement with their franchise guys. So it's easy to say these guys aren't worth the money until you don't have one, for sure.
What do you think this means for Joe Burrow?
That's why this is so smart on Philadelphia's part. I think if I'm Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert and their representatives, I look at the figures on this deal and I say, okay, this is the starting point. And again, if I'm Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, I say, well, I've done more over 3 years than this guy has. Like, sure, Jalen Hurts had a better one season last year than we did. But if you look at Justin Herbert's numbers over 3 years, you look at what Joe Burrow's done over the last 2 years, you say, you know, all told, considering the entire resume, we've done more than this guy in the league and more. So that's why, I think Jalen's salary averages out at 51. I bet by the time Joe and Herbert are done signing, it'll be pushing 60. And I really doubt we're very far away from a contract that's worth $300 million total.
I know that we get, you know, these constant reminders of how much these guys are making, and you know, it's crazy. I mean, do you ever just sit back to the point where we're at now where you're seeing the amount of money Jalen Hurts is getting guaranteed, even though you're probably numb to it somewhat? But, I mean, to reach the point that we have now with the Deshaun Watson contract and now what's going to follow, it's just kind of insane, right? The money being guaranteed at this stage, even though that might be the norm in Major League Baseball and whatnot.
I mean, I think it's just a testament to the popularity of the NFL, and that's why every time I might be tempted to think that, like, you know, we get so hung up on what these players are worth, but
sure,
the reason these players are worth that is because of what the league is worth. And no, I look at it and I say 48 of the 50 most watched TV shows in America this year were NFL football games. And it's like, it's the only thing that drives people to watch TV. It's the highest rated thing in America. It's the most talked about topic. That's why there's no off season anymore, because the league is so insanely popular that we can fill 365 days with content. And I mean, the league, even when with a global pandemic screwing the finances up for a year and a half, they've already rebounded to have their salary cap grow by 28% over the last 2 years. So yeah, I mean, these guys make a lot of money, but it's because of the absurd amount of billions that the NFL rakes in. And I think that's important to keep in mind, because for me, I can only speak for myself, but I'm always down to see millionaires make money when we're talking about a business run by billionaires. So that's where my head is when I see it, is like, yeah, these guys are super well paid, but it's because of the mind-bending profitability of the league that they're in.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I guess I should have clarified and looked at it more explained more from the standpoint of not counting anybody's pockets, but certainly like, holy cow, there are guys now making $150 million guaranteed playing, you know, just in general. I find that as somebody growing up kind of crazy that's the point we've reached. But yeah, as you mentioned, it's all, you know, well-deserved for sure.
I told somebody the other day, you know, in Cowboy country, we famously talk about Emmitt Smith's 2-week holdout at the beginning of the, whatever it was, the 94 season, I think, or maybe it was the 93 season. He was holding out for a contract that was worth $7 million. That was 28 years ago. And I mean, $7 million is like, that's middle of the pack pay for like a linebacker, you know, let alone a guy at the top of his position. I mean, the way that the league has exploded, and really, I mean, even over the last 20 years, I mean, we're not that far removed from it being crazy that a quarterback was making $16 million. But again, the popularity of this league is just, it's hard to wrap your head around. And it's crazier to think, like, is it ever going to slow down? Like, is there ever going to be a year where it just doesn't keep escalating and getting more and more profitable? And until that happens, we're going to keep seeing this. We're going to keep crossing these crazy benchmarks.
Yeah, and Troy Aikman was like one of the first big contracts. He was like a 5-year, $50 million deal back in the day, and everyone lost their minds. David, with the Dak contract, and now we see the others that have been signed, now this one with Jalen Hurts, and then, of course, Burrow. Won't his before, like in the next year or two, be like a steal in a way if he continues to at least progress and play well?
I would argue that it already is a steal.
Okay.
Just because, I mean, well, and that's what I try to tell people this, and very rarely do people want to listen to me. But again, the faster you can get this done, the cheaper it's going to look in the long run, because I always say 2 years from now, it's going to look like a steal, because Dak signed his deal 2 years ago. And now with Jalen signing, I don't even think he's in the top 10 anymore in any of the major categories.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's why I said that about Jalen is with the guys that are able to negotiate. I mean, it's not crazy to think that Lamar, Burrow, and Herbert could all have new deals by training camp. So that's 3 new deals in front of you within 6 months of signing. That's what I always try to tell people is the escalation of the market is going to make this thing look like a bargain in no time. I think Dak is already there. The interesting thing there is, and I know a lot of Cowboy fans don't want to hear this, it's probably time for the Cowboys to consider paying him again already, because, again, the price is only going to go up. And like I was talking about with flexibility before, Dak's running out of years that you can play with, which means he's about to be a cap-crippling quarterback. I mean, I think his cap hit next year is something insane, like $60 million. It's just an untenable number. And then you look at it and you say, would I rather play with Dak accounting for that much of my cap, or would I rather extend him and bring the cost down over 4 or 5 years? It's a fascinating conversation. I don't blame anybody for not loving it, considering Dak hasn't gotten the team where they want to go. But when you look around at the landscape, and again, when you look around at how much it sucks for teams that don't have a quarterback, I think there's a pretty good argument to be made that extending Dak is something the Cowboys should be thinking about already.
All right, David, if in fact the Eagles were to get Bijan Robinson, what would that mean in your opinion?
I mean, I hate to do semantics, but are we talking about top 10 or with their other first round pick?
Well, top 10 to me I think as talented and as good as he is, I think that would be too high. But let's say they get him and they're able to get him with their second pick. What would that do for them?
It's a fascinating conversation because I agree with you. I think 10 is too high to take a running back. But if the Eagles look at their roster and say, we got Jalen signed, we have all the important pieces of our offense signed, and a running back as good as Bijan Robinson would really put us in a tough to beat spot. They already had the best rushing offense in the league with Miles Sanders, and Bijan Robinson is a way better player. So you say, we'll have the best rushing offense in the league. We still have a plus passing game. Like, we can really maximize our opportunity to win a Super Bowl in the next 3 years with this guy on our team. If they were to draft Bijan at 10, that's what that says. It's like it's an all in. We think Bijan is a piece that'll give us a Super Bowl in the next 2 or 3 years. And then if they were to do it at 30, I just think that's common sense. Like, that's stealing money is what that is. Like, if you can get a player of Bijan's caliber onto a team as good as the Eagles at 30th overall, I don't think you even think about it. Right. And if he were available that late in the draft, I don't even think Howie Roseman would hesitate. I think what makes it interesting is that number 10 overall pick. Like, is it worth it to try to go over the top and say, this guy gives us a Super Bowl shot, or is the position just not valuable enough? And I don't know the answer, but I lean toward thinking, I just think Howie Roseman is a little bit too analytical to draft a running back that highly, but it's a hell of an interesting conversation.
Will they have to hide Jerry in a closet if Bijan is available and the Cowboys are picking?
I honestly, and we won't know until draft night, and we know what the other options are. Mm-hmm. But like, you know, it's so easy to say like, oh, running backs don't matter. It's not a valuable position. But like, in a world where Bijan Robinson is there at 26, I don't think it's crazy to draft him. I mean, and again, we don't know who would be there, but if we just assume nothing crazy happens and like a CD Lamb situation doesn't happen where a guy that has no business falling that far slips to you, then I think like Bijan Robinson will be the best player on the board at 26. And at 26 overall, I'm way less worried about the value than I would be in the top 10. So I don't think they would have to lock Jerry anywhere. I think if that were to happen, I think most of the people in the draft room at the Cowboys facility would agree, like, hey, we don't have to overthink this. We can add a damn good football player to our team in a good value spot. I don't really think it would be that dramatic.
Yeah, I don't either. I think you wouldn't have. I just think that it'd be hard to say no. That it would not be wrong. David, thank you so much, man. We're a week from Thursday from the NFL Draft. A great time. Appreciate your time. We'll talk to you next Monday.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks.
David Helman, Fox Sports with us, NFL analyst, is on their game day shows, is on there constantly, has done a great job. Used to cover the Cowboys with DallasCowboys.com, and now very much entrenched with the NFL coverage, on Fox Sports. Garrett, do we have one more break?